What if everything you've been told about history is incomplete? What if the greatest civilization ever to walk the earth was not a myth, but a memory deliberately erased? In 1965, astronauts orbiting the planet captured a photograph that still unsettles researchers today. Deep in the heart of the Sahara Desert, their lenses revealed a colossal, perfectly circular formation. Massive concentric rings stretching nearly 25 kilometers across the barren landscape. Scientists named it the Rishat structure. Locals call it the Eye of the Sahara. But here's what they didn't tell you. Those rings match in stunning detail the description of a city written down over 2,000 years ago, the fabled Atlantis. Welcome to Sealed Secrets. Tonight, we open the files that powerful institutions have tried to bury, files that suggest Atlantis was real and that its ruins may still lie in plain sight. Our story begins with the Greek philosopher Plato. Around 360 BCE, he recorded an account in two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. In them, he described a mighty island civilization larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. Atlantis, Plato wrote, was built of concentric rings of land and water, with bridges and canals connecting a gleaming central island to the outer world. Its harbors teemed with ships, its temples glinted with precious metals, its engineers harnessed forces that made their cities prosper beyond imagining. Yet with wealth came arrogance, and arrogance invited ruin. In a single day and night, Plato said, the island was swallowed up by the sea. For centuries, scholars insisted Plato invented this tale as allegory, a moral fable warning against hubris. Yet Plato himself was adamant. He claimed the story was not his invention. It was a record, he said, taken from Egyptian priests who had preserved an older memory carved in stone. These priests told the Athenian lawgiver Solon, "You Greeks are but children. You have no knowledge, hoary with age." That line has hung over Atlantis for millennia. Plato did not present a fairy tale. He presented testimony, a memory of something older than written Greek history. Whether you call it myth or memory, the question remains, what exactly were these priests remembering? Before we continue with the video and my further explanation about the Eye of the Sahara and its possible link to Atlantis, I want to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and help me out. Okay, let's continue. Fast forward 2,000 years. From orbit, NASA astronauts documented the Rishat structure, a vast, circular formation hidden in Mauritania's desert sands. At first glance, it looks like a bullseye painted on the Earth, concentric ridges rolling outward from a raised center. Geologists call it an eroded dome, shaped over millions of years by wind and water. But look closer, and the parallels to Plato's description are striking. Concentric rings, check. A central island-like rise, check. A diameter of roughly 25 kilometers, very close to Plato's given scale. And surrounding the structure, dry riverbeds fan out like spokes from a hub, as though water once drained from a central basin. Imagine a landscape that was once green and full of life, now reduced to sand and stone. Geological studies show that large parts of the Sahara were once savanna and lakes, home to flora and fauna, and likely human settlements. If a great city or civilization once existed here, time and climate might have buried it beneath layers of silt and sand. Or worse, it might have been deliberately obscured. The official line was swift and absolute. Natural formation, case closed. But the natural explanation leaves uncomfortable questions. Why is the Rishat's symmetry so pronounced? Why does its scale so closely match Plato's account? Why do certain aerial photos suggest linear and geometric alignments that seem unusually regular for a purely geological phenomenon? Independent researchers flagged these anomalies. Satellite images, surveyed maps, and ground reconnaissance all revealed patterns some interpreted as telltale signs of human planning. When such claims arose, mainstream responses were predictable: sensor error, misinterpretation, or coincidence. This pattern, quick dismissal followed by quiet silence, is the same playbook used in multiple controversial cases. The inconvenient is labeled noise. The anomalous declared irrelevant. But in the margins, questions persist. What amplifies skepticism into suspicion are the documents and leaks that never make the glossy pages of journals. Declassified reports from the 1970s mention anomalous structures in the Sahara. Satellite imagery leaked by anonymous sources shows subsurface lines and shapes beneath the sand, dismissed by some as artifacts of imaging technology. Excavation notes from small teams report pottery shards, stone tools, and skeletal remains in locations that, if validated, would rewrite timelines. In the late 1990s, a team of researchers published a brief preliminary notice about finds near the Reshat. Carbon-dated samples suggesting human activity in the deep past. Within months, the paper was downplayed. Permissions to dig were hard to secure. Follow-up work was limited and underfunded. Is that simply the normal friction of field archaeology, or the slow strangling of inconvenient data? Access to certain areas around the structure is restricted for security reasons. Military checkpoints and permits complicate research. Researchers who publicize unorthodox conclusions often find their funding cut or their reputations questioned. Whether these are cautious administrative decisions or intentional obfuscation depends on who you ask, but the effect is the same. The trail grows cold. If something as dramatic as Atlantis existed, we should see echoes, fingerprints of advanced knowledge left in disparate places. And when you look worldwide, anomalies accumulate. Artifacts and architectures that seem out of time. The Antikythera mechanism, a Hellenistic device of astonishing complexity, shows that ancient craftsmen built precise mechanical calculators. Puma Punku's perfectly cut blocks in Bolivia suggest stoneworking techniques difficult to replicate even today. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey forces historians to reconsider the origins of ritual and large-scale construction, dating monumental stone circles to around 12,000 years ago, long before the conventional agricultural revolution. Underwater archaeology has its own mysteries. Sunken cities off India's coast, submerged platforms around Japan and the Mediterranean, all hint at lost shorelines and drowned settlements. Individually, each site can be debated and explained away. Together, they sketch a pattern. Episodes of global complexity that traditional timelines sometimes struggle to accommodate. Is it possible human civilization has advanced, collapsed, and re-emerged multiple times? That what we call progress is less a straight line and more a series of rises and catastrophic resets? If so, Atlantis could be the most prominent of many forgotten worlds. Plato's account is explicit. Atlantis was consumed in a day and night of earthquakes and floods. Modern records point to a period of abrupt change around 11,600 years ago, coinciding with the younger Dryas, a dramatic set of climate shifts at the end of the last ice age. Ice core samples reveal spikes in airborne dust, sudden temperature swings, and geochemical signatures consistent with massive terrestrial changes. Some scientists propose cometary impacts, others argue for rapid volcanic events or complex feedbacks in Earth's climate system. Whatever the mechanism, the result was sudden and severe environmental stress on ancient populations. The Sahara's shift from green to desert was part of this global rearrangement. Lakes dried, rivers changed course, and coastlines altered as sea levels rose. A civilization sitting in a vulnerable coastal or inland sea environment could have been wiped from the living memory. Its remains scattered, submerged, or buried. Ancient flood myths, Mesopotamian, Indian, Native American, and others, may be cultural fossils of the same catastrophic events. When multiple cultures remember great floods and age-ending nights, skeptics call it coincidence. But perhaps these are cultural echoes of real, traumatic, planetary-scale events, preserved as story when science and memory parted ways. If Atlantis fell, where did its survivors go? Legends speak of refugees and wandering teachers who carried knowledge across continents. The Dogon, ancient American cultures, and some Mediterranean traditions hold stories that, when read alongside artifacts and sudden cultural shifts, suggest diffusion of knowledge. Could seafaring survivors have sown seeds of astronomy, agriculture, and engineering in distant lands? Or did a fragmented legacy of artisans and scholars inspire independent spurts of innovation in multiple regions? giving the impression of sudden leaps. These are not claims easily proved, but when oral traditions, mythic accounts, architectural techniques, and anomalies in the archaeological record converge, a tentative hypothesis emerges. Pieces of a lost culture's knowledge may have survived, folded into the origins of later civilizations. If evidence exists that undermines the established narrative, why would institutions resist? The short answer is control. Narratives about human origins feed into identity, power, and authority. Theology, national history, and academic prestige are all built, in part, on accepted chronologies. Admitting that an older, more advanced civilization existed would require revising textbooks, religious frameworks, and perhaps even political myths. Institutions and individuals with a stake in the status quo have incentives to be cautious, even resistant. That said, archaeology is conservative by nature. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Sometimes the resistance is warranted, but sometimes institutional caution crosses into gatekeeping. Distinguishing between the two is messy, and it is here, in that ambiguity, that conspiracy narratives are born. The Richat structure may or may not be Atlantis. The parallels are compelling: concentric rings, approximate scale, signs of ancient water, and scattered traces of human activity. The file is not closed. What is undeniable is that our planet's deep past is more complex than tidy textbooks would have you believe. Ruins, artifacts, and myths point to a past filled with brilliance, catastrophe, and reinvention. Whether Atlantis was a single dominant civilization or one of many sophisticated cultures we have yet to fully understand, the implication remains: human history is more layered than we admit. The most important question is not only whether Atlantis existed, it is why its memory persists across time and culture. Is this a shared myth, a psychological archetype, or the echo of a real place whose story slipped through the meshes of time? Maybe because it was real, maybe because humanity has risen and fallen before, and maybe because what we discover about the past will change how we imagine our future. The files may be sealed, but the secrets are not gone. With every leak, every discovery, and every careful excavation, more pieces of the puzzle find their way into the light. Archaeology is not static. It is a method of discovery, slow, contentious, and sometimes revolutionary. If tonight's revelations made you question the history you were taught, subscribe to Sealed Secrets. Help us hit 1,000 subscribers and keep this investigation alive. Join the archive. Help us dig, literally and figuratively, into the histories they never wanted you to see, because some secrets were never meant to stay buried.